Chimaev is just I mean, I was here when he retired from COVID, bro. I was training with him. Like, he's just it's like, if you knew, I always say there's guys, if you knew on a personal level you wouldn't like, Chimaev is one of those people if you knew you wouldn't like. He'll come in here. There's a video of me, I always like, oh, you're so good. Like, I'm being sarcastic. Like, bro, like, you go and you starch this one-on-one guy when there's like Edmund, there's like high-level UFC fighters, and you're picking the one-on-one fighter because like you think he's the same height as your opponent. No, you're picking him because you're dude. Like, it's just, he's just like, no matter he could fight, but like mentally he's just a weak man. He's just a weak man.
Alright, so as you can probably tell from my voice, I'm still a little bit sick, but I'm feeling way better than I did earlier this week, so expect my regular upload schedule again moving forward. Thanks for being so patient. That said, on Wednesday, a new Sean Strickland interview dropped where he had some choice words about Khamzat Chimaev and has escalated the ongoing feud between these two former training partners. In turn, Khamzat had his own response where he calls out Sean to fight regardless of whether it's in the octagon or not, and yeah, in this video I'm going to be talking about all this and more. Right off the bat, I have to point out the sheer hypocrisy that Sean Strickland of all people is calling out anybody really for going too hard in sparring. Here he is complaining about Khamzat beating up on lower level professional MMA fighters during sparring rounds. Meanwhile, there's mountains of footage of him beating the brakes off of guys that literally have no training at all. Sean has the record for longest fight time against online influencers in UFC history, where I'd like to add that most of the time he can't even knock these guys down. Like, Sean dropped Izzy with a well-placed right hand, but that weirdo Sneeko stayed on his feet the entire time, even when Strickland was throwing full force. Regardless, I think Sean's a bit delusional to try to take this bizarre moral high ground attack at Chimaev beating up on professional fighters when his most exciting fights from the last few years have been against internet nerds that have never put gloves on before. Don't get me wrong, I do agree that a fighter of Khamzat's caliber should not be pulverizing his training partners on a regular basis, but it's hypocritical of Sean to be preaching about UFC fighters beating on lesser trained people. I agree with what Sean's saying, but he is the last guy that should be giving this message. If he really feels that way, then stop beating these kids up on camera knowing that it's going to be posted online. Also, Sean, if you really hate influencers as much as you say you do, maybe stop hanging out with them as much as you do. But internet nerds aside, there's still a ton of videos out there that show him going crazy against other trained fighters. Given he doesn't go nearly as hard against trained guys as he does against untrained guys, which I think is hilarious. But if Sean's going to cry about Khamzat ground and pounding a guy too hard or submitting a guy too hard, then is he going to admit that he was out of line for knocking out his sparring partner here? Like, the guy is clearly way lower level than Sean, and he was clearly struggling to stay on his feet, let alone stay in the fight, yet he goes for the head kick anyway. Listen to the reaction of the guy standing off to the side as all of this goes down. Sean also makes it a point to mention that when he told Khamzat how good he was, that he was being sarcastic, but there is video footage of this interaction going down, and I don't know, man, it doesn't really sound like he was being sarcastic at all.
Have you sparred him? No, he gets a little bit. He gets a little bit. He gets a little bit. A little bit, yeah. Be nice. Thumbs up. Understand, you're better than most. You're better than everybody. So just don't hurt people.
Not really sure why he's trying to spin this narrative 2 years later that he never really thought that Khamzat was a good fighter, but Sean is gonna Sean, I guess. Yeah, Khamzat, definitely don't hurt your training partners. Only scumbags would do that. Okay, now listen to Khamzat's response to all of this here.
When you were in Vegas, you trained at Extreme Couture with Sean Strickland. He's been saying some stuff in interviews about, he just didn't like your approach. Just why do you think he's saying that, and do you have a response?
I don't know. When I was there, they never said anything, When I leave the Vegas and when they stop my visa, we start to talk. When I come back, I'm in LA, bro. Come on. If it's something personal for you, just come. I'm here whenever you want.
Now, I have been very critical of Khamzat in the past, but honestly, it seems like the guy's grown up a lot recently. I feel like this response only makes Strickland look even more like a man-child than he already was, which is saying something. I will say this, though, we do know that Sean did tell Khamzat to tone it down with his sparring partners at the time, and in Sean's defense, I think he actually did handle it pretty well. He made it clear that he disagreed with how Chimaev sparred, but he wasn't confrontational about it to the point where it would ruin the vibe within the gym. On the other hand, though, all of this "he's just a weak man" stuff coming from Sean all this time later just reeks of bitterness. And speaking of bitterness, this is far from the first time that Sean has called out Khamzat for not being a real man.
But this man goes back to Chechnya, sucks off a dictator, sucks him off. He was collected on, and then he goes and sells a Bitcoin scam. Chimaev
Chimaev can fight, but sir, you are not a fucking man. The world knows you as not a man. You will never be a fucking man, you little Chechen whore.
You, sir, are a whore. Doesn't matter how good of a fighter you are and will always be a fucking whore.
Khamzat, dude, the Chechen fucking whore, bro.
You want that?
Anybody who fights that guy's gonna get a fucking paycheck, dude. The fucking Chechen whore.
But why all the sour grapes? Why is Sean so damn salty? Well, the root of the beef stems back to the brief period of time when they were training together. Check out this interview Sean did with the Schmo in March of 22, where he openly admits to getting repeatedly submitted by Khamzat during sparring.
What'd you learn from yourself going up against that guy? The Schmo saw you two going at it. You were paired together during the grappling and obviously the striking.
I don't know. What'd you think?
I thought he was good competition.
Yeah, what did you think, though?
Well, I thought you both learned from each other.
What did you think, though, watching?
Well, I think you held your own standing, but on the ground, he does what he does.
Did he fuck me up on the ground? I want your honest opinion. Tell me.
He made you tap a couple of times. The Schmo saw it, but do you want the world to know this stuff or what?
You can tell the world. Listen, guys. Jiu-jitsu, I do the fucking man game, the fucking man dance.
Honestly, props to Sean for being so candid about how the sparring rounds went, especially when he was apparently on the receiving end of a mauling. Hey, sometimes you're the hammer and sometimes you're the nail, and in this case, he was clearly the latter, but at the end of the day, it's just sparring. I mean, I guess he does kind of ruin it by going into his whole I do the man dance nonsense. Like, he's definitely trying to deflect the embarrassment of getting steamrolled, but I can appreciate how open and honest he was about how it went. Okay, now let's fast forward about a year and a half to October 2023. Khamzat was about to fight Kamaru Usman, but during one of his media day interviews, he had this to say about Sean winning the middleweight title.
You know, I've taken him down, I've held him down, I've choked him, I've punched him. I mean, I've done all those things, so I don't see anything, you know, something special about him. Basically, he's a fighter's fighter. He's a good fighter. You know, if you look at him, he's like a, you know, an American cowboy, like from the movies. That's the kind of guy he is. But you know, we've done our work in the gym together, and if they offer him to me, if I can fight him for the belt, that's what I'll do. You know, I make the money, get the belt. I have nothing against him. I think that if you compare us on a skill levels wise, I'm levels above him. I'm in a whole different stratosphere from him. So, you know, he's not a threat to me. But, you know, he's a good guy. He's a good fighter. And if I can, I'd fight anybody. I'd ready to fight anyone. So if there's a belt there, I'll fight him, no problem.
This was the exact moment that the friendly relationship between these two died. And I'm not gonna lie, I have conflicting feelings on what Khamzat said here. For the most part, I do think that he was a bit out of line for brazenly saying that he beat up Sean in sparring, but at the same time, didn't Sean already do that over a year prior? I suppose there is a difference between Sean saying that he got beat up in one singular sparring session compared to Khamzat basically saying that he consistently whoops Sean's ass week in, week out, but it's about professionalism. The concept of not airing out what happens in sparring between pro fighters has been practiced not just in MMA, but boxing as well for decades. Sparring is an opportunity for two guys to help each other grow and improve, and the results really shouldn't matter all that much. There's almost always a winner and a loser in sparring, but the argument can be made that if the loser learns more, then he probably got more out of the experience than the guy who won. But again, Sean already made it clear that he got beat up by Khamzat, so I can genuinely see Chimaev thinking that he had the green light to talk about how their sparring rounds went, and I understand that they probably never saw each other as friends, but they were quite literally co-workers for a couple of weeks who spend nearly every single day together in the gym, so I do think it was bad form for Khamzat to say what he did. Nuances aside, Sean did not take kindly to Khamzat saying this because this is what he had to say on the matter a couple of weeks later.
Let me tell you about Chimaev, guys. This is a f***ing true story. And, you know, since we're going to talk about training, one day I made fun of a Chechenian, and he misunderstood what I said. And it was more of like a compliment to the fighter, and he sent me a message talking shit. And I said, Chimaev, you misunderstood, but I will see you tomorrow at 3 o'clock, gloves or no gloves, turn up. And then, guess what? No show, no answer. We talked it out. He said, no, it's okay, we talked about it. Here's the thing about Chimaev, the man could fight. The man could fight. We all know that. He beat Usman to a decision. You know, Usman old, retired, but whatever. He still did it. But me and him are different. Chimaev could be right here. I will fight that man to the death right here, knowing I'm going to die.
He literally says, seeing as we're talking about sparring, the guy was and is still pissed at Khamzat's comments. And yes, I do think that Chimaev was in the wrong here, but Sean, come on, you ain't fighting anybody to the death. The only guys you're fighting to the death are YouTubers that are half your size. Also, take note of the fact that he says that Khamzat is a good fighter, so again, him turning around this week to say that he was being sarcastic way back when is just severe levels of cope. Side note, whenever I watch this clip, I can't help but feel like Sean is trying his hardest to impress Don Fry, who's obviously sitting right next to him. The way I see it, Fry is the real man that Sean wants to see himself as, and for good reason. Don is a certified badass. But instead of the quiet confidence that Don carries himself with, Sean's insatiable desire to be seen as tough makes him yell like a maniac and just be generally obnoxious. Don is an actual real-life tough guy, whereas Sean is just a cheap caricature of a tough guy. Then, a couple of months later, Khamzat doubled down on his claims.
Ask that guy who was beating you up every day in the gym, huh?
How many times I submit the guy? How many times I beat him up? He went to his coach, man. He went to his coach. Please tell the guy, man, go easy, go easy. And the guy going with this different. He said like I went crazy with the guys who was going 166 or this, man. He's lying, man. When I punch you hard, you went to your coach and said, please tell the guy, go easy, easy. Oh, off, man. What are you talking about?
You might notice that he said that Sean's claims of singling out one-on-one fighters in the gym is a lie, which as we know is something that Sean is still talking about to this day. I'm not going to get into who I think is actually lying because it's impossible for us to know, but what we do know is that one of them is lying, and I wonder who it is. Then a couple of months after that, Khamzat tripled down.
Он сперва сказал, что на спарринге меня побил. Ну, там ребята были, все видели. И даже это видео там есть, как я его душил и бил. И с ним тоже есть такое дело. Выйти в клетку и посмотреть, кто сильнее в клетке.
And to bring this video full circle, this guy, Sean, is just so fragile. He took offense to one admittedly unprofessional comment and has turned it into a feud that's going on 2 full years now. And seeing as how he's been saying the same, you're not a real man, I'm a real man, since like 2023, and now that Khamzat's basically just like, yeah, whatever, bro, about the situation, he's the only one keeping the beef alive at this point. If I were to put myself in Sean's cowboy boots, I can understand being annoyed and maybe even a little pissed off for a couple of months, maybe, but the idea of him carrying this level of anger towards the guy for this long over something like this just seems overkill to me. Khamzat lives rent-free in Sean's head. Khamzat is so at home in Sean's head he gets his mail sent there. Khamzat's furniture is about to be moved into Sean's head later this week. I would also like to point out that despite all of the shit talk from Sean, he has never actually called out Khamzat to fight. He's spoken about fighting him in hypothetical terms, like if we were to fight it would be to the death, but he's never said, I want to fight Khamzat on this day at this event. I'm sure he says that he's willing to fight him so that he can preserve his image of being an all-American tough guy, but until he actually makes concrete moves towards setting up a fight with him, I'm going to keep on assuming that he doesn't want the smoke. And hey, I get it, Khamzat's a scary dude, I wouldn't want to fight him either. But if Sean's going to keep calling him out for not being a real man, while at the same time doing everything that he can to avoid setting up a fight with him, then this all just makes him sound like a bitter ex-girlfriend that hasn't moved on. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about Sean's constant trash talk. Do you think he actually wants to fight Khamzat, and who would win that fight if it